26, while most of the world was celebrating, SpaceX quietly made a move that stunned the space industry. Not a launch, not an upgrade. An emergency. The company announced it would immediately relocate 4,400 Starlink satellites to a lower orbit. That's nearly half its entire constellation. This wasn't routine maintenance. This was damage control. Because in just 6 months, the risk of collisions in Earth's orbit has increased by 200%. Right now, 550 kilometers above your head, space is becoming dangerously crowded. And SpaceX's own data suggests we may already be closer to disaster than anyone wants to admit. Satellites are dodging debris every 2 minutes. Objects are breaking apart without warning. And no one fully understands what triggered the latest failure. The question isn't whether orbital space is getting risky. The question is far more unsettling. Have we already crossed the point of no return? 3 weeks before SpaceX's announcement, something went wrong in orbit. On December 17th, 2025, a Starlink satellite launched just 1 month earlier suddenly stopped responding. This wasn't a planned shutdown. This wasn't routine degradation. It was violent. The satellite began venting propellant, tumbling uncontrollably, losing attitude and power almost at once. Within minutes, it was effectively dead. SpaceX initially described the incident carefully. A malfunction, a limited release of material, a small number of trackable objects. But independent tracking told a different story. Leo Labs, one of the world's leading commercial space tracking companies, detected hundreds of debris fragments spreading from the satellite's last known position. Each fragment now travels around Earth at roughly 17,000 miles per hour. At that speed, even a bolt-sized object can destroy an operational spacecraft. And here's the part that alarms engineers. No one knows exactly what failed. There was no collision detected beforehand. No external impact. No solar storm warning. Whatever happened began inside the spacecraft itself. That means every satellite with similar hardware, similar fuel systems, similar design assumptions suddenly became a question mark. This wasn't just one satellite breaking. It was a reminder that a single failure can instantly multiply into hundreds of new threats. And once debris is created at that altitude, it doesn't politely go away. It stays. It spreads. And it forces every other satellite nearby to start dodging. Which brings us to the number SpaceX couldn't ignore anymore. Because this failure didn't happen in isolation. It happened in an orbital environment already pushed to its limits. After the December failure, SpaceX reviewed its internal collision data. What they found was impossible to ignore. Between December 2024 and May 2025, Starlink satellites executed 144,000 collision avoidance maneuvers. That's nearly 800 maneuvers per day. One every 2 minutes. This wasn't a gradual increase. It was a spike. A 200% rise in just 6 months. Collision avoidance isn't free. Every maneuver burns fuel. Every maneuver shortens satellite lifespan. Every maneuver introduces new uncertainty. And here's the problem. Collision avoidance only works if everyone cooperates. Debris doesn't maneuver. Dead satellites don't respond. Fragments don't care who owns the orbit. This wasn't a future traffic jam. It was already happening. And SpaceX realized something uncomfortable. At their current altitude, they were operating inside the most dangerous shell of low Earth orbit. Most people assume space slowly cleans itself. That's not always true. Earth's upper atmosphere expands and contracts based on solar activity. During solar maximum, increased radiation heats the atmosphere, increasing drag. Debris falls faster. Dead satellites decay sooner. But that cycle is ending. Starting in 2027, we enter solar minimum. The atmosphere contracts. Drag weakens. Objects stay in orbit far longer. A dead satellite at 550 kilometers can remain there for over 4 years. At lower altitudes, only months. SpaceX saw the clock ticking. If they waited too long, thousands of satellites would be trapped in the most collision-prone zone, just as natural cleanup slowed to a crawl. That's why the move had to happen now. Not next year. Not after another failure. Immediately, SpaceX's solution sounded backwards. Move 4,400 satellites closer to Earth. Drop them 70 kilometers lower, from 550 to 480 kilometers. Lower orbit means more atmospheric drag, which sounds bad, but here's the trade-off. At 480 kilometers, A failed satellite deorbits in months, not years. An 80% reduction in orbital lifetime. And there's another advantage. Below 500 kilometers, space is significantly less crowded. Fewer satellites. Fewer fragments. Fewer unknown objects. This isn't fixing orbital debris. It's avoiding it. SpaceX isn't cleaning up the mess. They're stepping out of the room. Right now, SpaceX operates roughly 9,300 satellites, out of about 11,000 active satellites total. That means one private company controls 85% of all operational satellites humanity has ever launched. Every other nation. Every other company. Every space agency combined. 15%. That imbalance has not gone unnoticed. At a United Nations Security Council meeting in late December, China's representative issued a carefully worded warning. Unchecked commercial satellite expansion has created serious safety and security risks. They didn't name SpaceX. They didn't need to. The United States responded by emphasizing disaster response, global connectivity, and humanitarian benefits. Both statements were true, and both sides were nervous, because scale changes everything. Last year, researchers modeled a worst-case scenario. Not aliens, not war, just loss of control. A solar flare, a cyber failure, a cascading software fault. Once active satellite control is lost, how long before collisions spiral out of control? Their answer was chilling. 3 days. Under solar minimum conditions, the first major collision could trigger a debris cascade within 72 hours. This is known as Kessler syndrome. One collision creates debris. That debris causes more collisions, an exponential chain reaction. Entire orbital bands become unusable. For decades, possibly generations. SpaceX's 200% increase in avoidance maneuvers suggests something unsettling. We may already be in the early phase, and yet launches continue. Amazon plans thousands more satellites this year. China has announced constellations exceeding 10,000 units. No one is slowing down. So, the real question isn't whether space is crowded. It's whether humanity can still govern it. If an American satellite collides with debris from a Chinese launch and damages a European spacecraft, who's responsible? There's no orbital police. No enforcement authority. No binding limits. SpaceX says the reconfiguration will take all of 2026, coordinated with U.S. Space Command and other operators. But what happens to the orbital zone they leave behind? Does it become a dead shell? Or does someone else rush in to fill the gap? Within 5 years, we'll know whether this move was a solution, or just buying time. Because the system you rely on for GPS, weather, and satellite internet is more fragile than it looks. And it's one bad day away from a cascade no one can stop. So, here's where we really are. SpaceX didn't move 4,400 satellites because it wanted to. It did it because the math stopped working. Collision risk didn't rise slowly. It exploded. One failure turned into hundreds of debris fragments. Hundreds of fragments forced thousands of maneuvers. And thousands of maneuvers revealed a truth nobody likes to say out loud. Low Earth orbit is no longer forgiving. This wasn't a warning shot about the future. It was a reaction to the present. We've built a system where one mistake, one software error, one energetic failure can ripple outward faster than any government or company can respond. And the cleanup mechanism we've relied on, atmospheric drag, is about to weaken for years. That's the real danger. Not one satellite, not one company, but scale without brakes. SpaceX moving lower might reduce its own risk, but it doesn't solve the global problem. It just shifts it. And as more satellites launch, more constellations fill the sky, and more debris accumulates, the margin for error keeps shrinking. At some point, avoidance turns into survival. The uncomfortable question isn't whether we can manage Earth's orbit. It's whether we waited too long to try, because space doesn't reset. There's no repair window, no second copy. If we lose control of low Earth orbit, we don't just lose satellites. We lose navigation, communication, weather forecasting, disaster response, the invisible infrastructure modern life depends on. So when SpaceX makes an emergency move like this, it's not just a corporate decision. It's a signal. And signals like this don't come early. They come when the system is already under strain. What happens next will decide whether this was a course correction, or the moment we realize the road ahead has no exit. And that's something every nation, every company, and every one of us should be paying attention to.